Hello my fellow adventurers and welcome on back. This is Lunissa, back with another video. Thank you so much for checking it out, and as you can see, we are in the creative world of Lunis. For those of you who have not seen the first video, please feel free to check it out. That way you can go ahead and see the overview of what the world is like and the different areas that we can be inspired by and might be working on transforming throughout this series. But for now, we're going to go ahead and start in this area to really get that transformation going. One of the first things that I want to do is work on the terraforming so we can prepare the area to create a nice focal point from which to branch out our building from and to really start getting a feel for what the lore of this area will be. So with that, let's get the terraforming underway. Aside from prepping this original smaller area, I do also want to terraform some of the surrounding land. So we're going to come over here and kind of smooth out these edges a little bit, make it more of a flatter plane so that we have more room to work with. There are a lot of dips, a lot of ponds, and random areas that don't really lend themselves very well to a smooth area. So I do want to focus on smoothing those out first to make sure that we have room to build. However, I don't want to do too much terraforming. I want to be inspired again by the land itself, just smoothing it out, making it a little bit more building friendly, but still keeping with this idea of what is the lore, like how would the original adventurers and the original inhabitants transform this area themselves. For example, this little pond right here really seems to be a good spot to have made a settlement or some kind of village. So I want this to actually be the first focal point that we make, really transforming this body of water, however small it may be, into something that would have inspired those adventurers to set up a camp and eventually a civilization. So in order to do that, first I want to make sure that there is a little bit more room so that they could walk around, go ahead and actually access this area. So we're going to go ahead and clean it up a little bit. And again, as we're cleaning it up, also smoothing it out a little bit so it looks a little bit more natural. You may notice that I go back and forth, making some more edits, being like, okay, this looks good, and then completely changing it up. And that's fine. That is one thing I do want to emphasize, is that take your time with the terraforming, whether you are in creative or survival. There is no right or wrong. There are ways of making it look nicer, making it look cleaner, but ultimately trial and error, experimenting, seeing what really seems to work for you and your vision. I kept going back and making these changes, trying to really let myself be inspired by what was around me while also trying to make it look a little cleaner. Now moving to the other part of this, it's also working with the water features of the world. So for example, there are some great spots of water right here, but I don't really want a whole lot of water since I do want that other pond to be the focal point. So I went through and covered them up. But I also got to thinking, how could this be part of the world? And the thought that came to mind was underwater aquifers. So this could be a great place to put some wells. Maybe this led to the initial farmlands that were created because of the fact that this water was running right under where they decided to settle. So it was easier to access and they didn't have to always go back and forth to that pond. So taking that inspiration, I went ahead and started terraforming this area to fit a well. Knowing that there was the water underneath, I took advantage of that knowledge to completely cover it up and then figure out where I felt would be the best place for that well. Once I placed that hole, I went ahead and decided, how big do I actually want this to be? And considering that this is maybe just a small private well, I decided to go with a smaller size. So I pulled out a community block, which we'll get into in a bit, and put down the blueprint for this well, since I'm figuring it might be shared between a couple of houses at least. Once I have that blueprint, I go ahead and carve it out a little bit more and put down a few things so that I remember that it's going to be a well and really get that going. I'm not going to do a full build just yet since I'm still at the very beginning of this world and still doing a lot of terraforming, but knowing myself, I don't want to forget what I was inspired to do. So I go in, place a cauldron, as you can see, fill it with water, realize that looks a little too blue compared to the rest of the water, empty it, and then I put a chain so that it's as if it's a bucket of water going down into the well. Keep in mind that it is an aesthetic choice. I decided not to fill it with water because I felt it looks better, but you do not have to do that. You can fill it with water. Again, this is all about what do you envision, what inspires you. For me, my first build in this world, aside from the terraforming, is a well. Because this is kind of giving me an idea of, okay, well, they have this pond, but not everyone is going to be going to this pond, especially if it's going to be a slightly bigger village rather than just something very centralized around that pond. So I went ahead and made this well. And the little details are the things that will bring this world to life the most. They might even really help you build up that lore. Already, I have this idea of a couple of homes that share this well. So at the very least, that's a couple of settlers, a couple of villagers that are already kind of going to come into existence. So again, letting your inspirations come through. I personally like to be inspired by the land, combine it with my own inspirations, and see what comes out. I don't have a final plan, so you're in for the ride just as much as I am. Now, I did mention community blocks. What do I mean by community blocks? Aren't they all blocks? There's no such thing as a community block, right? Technically, no. So one of the things that I personally like to do is create a key or guide for myself. The way that I do it is I usually go ahead and build a platform high enough that it's not going to get too much in the way and long enough that I can keep myself organized. I personally like to use glass. I just like the way that it looks as a platform because I don't want things just kind of hovering. You don't have to use glass though. You can use anything else to make your platform if you so choose to do this. You could use wood. You could go ahead and use glowstone and make it light up even at night. You can use gold. Heck, you can even use diamond. You can make it as simple or as fancy as you like. You don't even have to put anything. You can just put the blocks. This is purely an aesthetic and personal choice, and it's just something for myself more than what's going to be in the final build. This will eventually go away. But as for the blocks themselves, I like to do a color-coded system. So I use the wool blocks to indicate the difference between different buildings that I am planning out for the blueprints. So as far as blueprint colors, I usually like to start out with the more bigger building kind of things. So for example, this white wool block could be the village walls and the boundaries of those villages, while this gray block can be where we put defense towers or any kind of defense. Then I went ahead and chose a brown, orange, yellow, red, green, and purple. And as I got to the end, I realized I also wanted to include a teal or a blue, just because that way I can include something else, and you'll see in a moment. But I chose brown for farms and fields, orange for work sites, so the villager blocks, work blocks, yellow for the community and town structures, so maybe things like a library, red for homes, because red like a heart is where the home is. And then I went ahead and chose a bit of a darker green for this, but I went ahead and used green for the parks because it just makes the most sense to me, parks and gardens. Purple for any kind of royalty building, so any kind of castles or keeps, as well as government, so like town halls and such, since purple is the color of royalty. And then the teal that I decided to add on, I always feel like I have either too many ideas and I can't quite figure out what I want to do with it, or I feel like there's just something missing and I don't know what just yet. So I like to give myself a little bit of that flexibility with an extra color that is just for to be determined miscellaneous kind of things. Another thing that I like to do based off of this is creating kind of like a hub. That way I know where to go, like whether I'm over here, over there, I always know where to come back to. So in order to do that, you need to make a beacon. So you need some iron blocks. Once you put your beacon down, You can go ahead and put a glass on top if you want a different color so that you can, differentiate different locations, but you don't have to. And you can make it out of whatever you want. Next thing I do, it's not necessary, but I find useful, it's creating a roadmap of sorts. So I put up this little board and I go ahead and put rough ideas of where I want things to go. So up ahead, we're going to have the mountain village. Off to the left side, we're going to have the main hub village, which we'll be working on for the first part of this series. Off to the other side, we're going to have maybe some farming area or maybe a small camp between this village and the next. And then moving over to this side, we can see a roadmap for the things on this direction. So if I want to make a desert city over up ahead, back over where the farmlands and such will be, we'll do a desert temple back at that one mountain that I had pointed out in the first video. Off to the other side, we'll probably do some more medium villages or smaller villages. And also there is that wonderful area that I saw where we were thinking of doing a quarry or working with the bees. So this is just to help me stay a little bit more inspired and remembering what kind of ideas I had and what the directions are so that I don't get myself too tripped up. Again, these things aren't necessary. These are more aesthetic stuff, organizational stuff. It may work for you. You might just keep everything in mind. You might prefer pencil and pen and putting it on paper. You might just kind of wing it. Anything goes. Everything works. It's all about finding your own personal method. And this just happens to be mine. If it helps you, let me know down below. If you have other ideas or tips, also please share them. I'm always looking for new ways to improve my building as well as ways to keep that momentum going. So I would really appreciate both of those kinds of comments down below. And with that, I think that we have a pretty good start to this world. Yes, there wasn't too much building right now, but it was a lot of getting things ready, getting things prepped, really starting to get a feel for this world. If you wanted to think about it as a metaphor, this could be putting your paints onto a palette for art. This is preparation, and this is just how I go about getting prepared. So we have really looked at the land, done some terraforming, kind of gotten that basic shape of what the land is going to look like, so that it's a little easier to put down those structures, done all these things, even put down a blueprint for one of our first builds. We've narrowed down, okay, these are going to be our focal points, put up our organizational tools, and again, none of this is necessary. This is all either for aesthetics or your own personal use. So this is just how I do it. You might have a different way. Again, I would appreciate those comments if you found this useful or if you have any other things that you have found useful. But hopefully this kind of gives you an idea or some extra inspiration on how to go about getting started with your own creative world. We have now set ourselves up to really jump in to our first actual builds during the next episode. And in that one, my goal is to really get that focal point built up, so getting that pond ready, and hopefully starting to lay down those roads, or at least a blueprint of where those roads are going to go. And that will hopefully lead to a flourishing settlement. But with that, thank you for checking out this video. I appreciate all of the support. I appreciate you coming back and checking it out. Hopefully you found something useful or found something different than what you've seen before or use, and that you're able to bring it into your own building, or at least get inspired to try something different and figure out your own toolkit for approaching building in Minecraft. Once again, thank you so much. Please feel free to check out any of our socials. Leave a like if you like this. Subscribe if you want to get more updates as content begins to come out and we really get into the building. Hang out with us in our Discord. Watch live streams of Minecraft and other games on Twitch. And as always, take care, have a good night, have a good day, and enjoy whatever adventures life throws at you between now and the next time we hang out. And until then, this is Lunissa signing off, and I will see you on the next adventure. Thanks, everybody!